My family ignored my ICU call to help my sister pick paint for her new apartment, so I cut them from my $402 million estate and watched their empire collapse. The fluorescent office lights flickered overhead like they were mocking me. I gripped the sides of the podium tighter, the numbers on the slide blurring, blending into a nightmare with no exit. I could hear my own voice trembling across the room filled with eager faces. As you can see in the third quarter financial report, the words sounded hollow in the dizziness. Everything spun, the charts turning into distorted streaks of color. I felt my heart no longer beating in rhythm. It was as if it wanted to tear through my chest and escape. I'm Nora Gibson, Chief Financial Officer of a major real estate corporation in New York, 36 years old, and I was dying in the middle of the highest point of my career. A voice called from the back of the room. "Nora, are you okay?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. The room suddenly tilted to the left. It felt like I was floating in space before everything went dark. Chaotic voices erupted. "Call 911. She's not breathing. Clear the room." My assistant, Mary's terrified face appeared above me, her mascara running down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. "Nora, stay with us. The ambulance is coming." I tried to lift my hand, but my body felt like stone. I whispered barely a moan. "Call my parents, please." Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, there was only one sensation left in my body: freezing cold. Urgent medical voices surrounded me. Unfamiliar medical terms like cardiac arrest and emergency surgery sliced into my ears like sharp knives. I clung to the wrist of a nurse, my vision as dim as a curtain not fully drawn. "My phone. I need to call my family." She hesitated for a moment, then placed the cold phone in my hand. I dialed my mother, straight to voicemail. I tried my father. Nothing. The messages I sent became a frantic blur. Shaky, desperate words. "Mom, I'm at the hospital. They're prepping for surgery. Dad, please pick up. I'm so scared." Finally, the nurse gently took the phone from my hand. "We need to go now, Miss Gibson. I'm sure they'll be here when you wake up." But they didn't come. I woke up after surgery, lying silently in the ICU. The steady beeping from the heart monitor played a dull, lonely tune. Mary had left a note on my bedside table saying she'd return in the morning, but the hospital only allowed immediate family after visiting hours. Family? What a joke. At 3 a.m., the night nurse softly adjusted my fourth. "Your mother left a voicemail," she said gently. "Would you like to hear it?" I nodded, a faint hope flickering in my aching chest. My mother's voice came through as cold as ice. "Nora, we got your messages, but your dad and I can't come right now. Emily's having a meltdown over the color they painted her new apartment. You know how sensitive she is. If she feels better tomorrow, we'll stop by. Love you." I turned away, tears sliding down my face. The nurse looked at me with pity. "Would you like me to call someone else for you?" I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. My mind flashed back to last Christmas, when I'd quietly paid off Emily's $55,000 credit card debt. My mother hadn't even looked up from Emily's new handbag. "Thanks, Nora. You're such a good daughter. Good. Good enough to be left alone in this cold hospital." I inhaled deeply. "Could you hand me my phone, please? I need to call my lawyer." The nurse looked surprised, but handed me the phone. My fingers no longer trembled as I dialed. "Lucas, it's me. Come here now. Bring all the documents I asked you to prepare. I'm in the ICU. And no, my family isn't here. That's exactly why I'm calling." I stared at the ceiling. The heart monitor beeped slowly. But now its rhythm was unfamiliar, resolute. I thought I was used to my family's coldness, but that night in the empty ICU, I realized I was wrong. I had never gotten used to it. I had only tried to. My phone buzzed at 4 a.m. A voicemail from my mother. I hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed play, clinging to a foolish shred of hope. "Nora, it's Mom. I just talked to Emily. She's really upset. The mint green paint in the living room made her cry all night. You know how sensitive she is. I know you're not feeling great, but our family is going through a tough time. We'll try to stop by tomorrow if things settle down. Rest well. Love you." I froze. It wasn't the voice of a mother worried about her daughter who had just undergone heart surgery. It was a tone filled with pity for Emily, my 24-year-old little sister, who was distraught over a paint color. I let out a dry, hollow laugh, sounding like something inside me finally cracked. Mary returned in the early morning, quietly placing a coffee cup on my bedside table without saying much. Maybe she knew there were no words that could patch the emptiness inside me right now. "You have another message from your mother," Mary whispered. I didn't bother reading it. I knew it would just be the same shallow words. The hospital now felt like a cheap theater after a bad play, only me and the soulless machines remaining. I remembered last Christmas writing a $60,000 check to clear Emily's debt. My mother hadn't even looked up from Emily's leather-bound photo album. Everyone just told me, "Nora, you really are the good daughter." I wasn't the good daughter anymore. Beside my hospital bed, I asked Mary to call Lucas again. "Bring all the paperwork. I need you immediately." The words came out like a breath, not a single hesitation. I had spent 36 years carrying the family's burdens. Enough. When Lucas arrived, his dark suit clashing with the sterile white lights, I barely glanced at him. "You know what to do, don't you?" "I know," he replied, his voice lower than usual. "But are you sure?" I glanced at the heart monitor, the rhythm steady, as if nothing had happened. "I've been sure since the moment my mother left me here for a botched paint job." Lucas said nothing more. He simply opened his briefcase, arranging stacks of papers neatly on the table beside my hospital bed. Wills, bank documents, the deed to the Florida mansion, the place my family spent every summer like some ritual to flaunt their status to their wealthy friends. I glanced over each page, signing my name without the slightest tremor. Every stroke of the pen felt like cutting through invisible chains that had bound me. Lucas nodded after gathering the files. "The house will be listed for sale today. All accounts tied to your family have been frozen. They'll receive the notifications by the end of the day." My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. Emily picked the paint color, dark olive, crisis over. "How are you feeling, Nora?" I handed the phone to Lucas. "Take a look." He read it, letting out a long sigh. Unbelievable. I smirked. Watch what I do next. I opened the family group chat. The messages were still flooded with photos of Emily posing in front of her freshly painted wall, along with a painfully long caption about her struggle to find her personal identity through the color of her living room. My fingers flew across the screen. "Still in ICU after emergency heart surgery, thanks for asking. Super glad all of one over mint. Totally worth missing your daughter's near-death experience." Lucas looked at me, a mix of admiration and worry in his eyes. "You know how they're going to react, right?" I placed the phone face down. "Let them react. They've lived in their bubble long enough. Time to pop it." The phone lit up non-stop after that. Messages from my mother, my father, Emily, all exactly as I predicted. "Nora, don't make a scene. The doctor said you're stable now. Seriously, why am I getting dragged into this?" I leaned back into the pillow, staring at the blinding white ceiling. "Keep going, Lucas. We're not done yet." Lucas didn't need much time to complete everything I requested. He was the only person I trusted enough to untangle the knots my family had tied around my neck for 36 years. When the faint morning light seeped through the ICU window, he laid the documents in front of me, each page marked with neon stickers. I looked at him, strangely calm. "Where do we start?" My voice was hoarse after a sleepless night. Lucas pulled up a chair beside the bed. "We start with the will. I've drafted a new one. Just needs your signature." I nodded. Each stroke of the pen severed the old veins I had forced myself to keep tied to that family. I crossed out my parents from the list of heirs. Not a hint of hesitation. "Next are the accounts you've been using to support Emily financially. I've listed every monthly expense here. They'll be shut down once you sign." I looked at the numbers, tuition payments, car purchases, credit card bills, even the rent for Emily's latest apartment, all quietly paid by me in exchange for hollow messages like, "Thanks, sis." I signed without flinching. "Shut it all down." Lucas studied me carefully. "Are you sure this is going to hit them hard?" "Let it hit them," I replied flatly. I've spent my whole life afraid of disappointing them. Now it's their turn to know what it feels like to be left behind. I turned toward the window. The city skyline was painted in soft orange hues of dawn. New York never sleeps, but I wasn't asleep anymore, not in the way I used to be. Lucas flipped through the files. Lastly, the Naples villa. Your family's using it this summer. Want me to list it now? I gave a faint smile. What do you think? Of course now. They've always assumed it was the family's. Time they learned the difference between ownership and illusion. Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting an unusual sense of empathy. He knew me too well. He had seen me endure, carry the weight, retreat every time I got hurt. What he saw now wasn't the same woman he once knew. My phone buzzed nonstop. My family had surely read my group chat message from last night. I didn't bother to check. I no longer needed to hear their empty excuses or meaningless blame. Lucas stood, gathering the documents. I'll send the official notice to them by the end of the day. Do you want it to include a personal message? I stayed silent for a moment, then shook my head. No need. The documents will speak for themselves. Lucas packed up his files, glancing over at me, his eyes softening. Nora, do you realize you're finally doing the one thing you've avoided your whole life? I opened my eyes and looked straight at him. You're wrong. I didn't avoid it. I just wasn't ready. Now I am. Lucas gave a sad smile. I understood all too well. All right, I'll do my part. But Nora, brace yourself for the storm. I didn't respond. I was ready for the storm. This time I would be standing at its eye, no longer swept away. After Lucas left, I allowed myself to lie back on the bed, listening to the clear, steady sound of my own heartbeat in my chest. No excuse for anyone, not to hold anyone up. Simply for me. 3 days after surgery, they finally showed up. My mother entered the hospital room as if she were walking into an upscale brunch in Manhattan. A Hermes scarf wrapped around her neck, holding a lavish bouquet of white flowers, her makeup so perfectly done, it dulled the cold ICU lights. My father trailed behind her, his face twisted in discomfort like he was being dragged into a dull business meeting. My mother rushed in, eyes scanning the room, scrunching her nose. Oh, Nora, the lighting here is just terrible for your skin. I let out a dry laugh. Almost dying tends to have that effect. Mother? My father cleared his throat. Come now, princess. Let's not talk like that. We're here now, aren't we? 3 days later, I corrected. 3 days? But who's counting, right? My mother pretended to arrange the flowers, trying to act casual. Emily really wanted to come, but she's still dealing with the contractor. The kitchen ceiling was done wrong. She cried all morning. I pressed the morphine button, not for the pain, but for patience. So, where is Emily? My father glanced around like she might pop out from behind the curtain. I'd guess she's posting an Instagram story about the ceiling, I replied. My mother froze for a split second, but quickly regained her fake composure. Nora, you know how sensitive Emily is. She's been beside herself worrying about you. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Funny. I haven't seen that in her messages or voicemails, but I did see lots of ceiling pics, paint colors, and her self-discovery journey through crown molding. My father coughed lightly, avoiding my gaze. Princess, maybe you're overreacting a little. I couldn't hold back the cold laugh. Overreacting? I almost died. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but the door swung open. Lucas walked in, his dark gray suit cutting through the stark white room like a sharp blade. He carried a thick folder, his face expressionless. My mother immediately plastered on her fake smile. Lucas, darling, so lovely to see you. Are you here to check on Nora? She needs friends like you around. Lucas returned a polite smile. No, Mrs. Gibson. I'm here today as her attorney. My mother's face visibly paled. My father leaned forward, his smile faltering. Attorney? Nora? What is this? I calmly opened the folder Lucas handed me, the documents I signed 3 days ago, including my new will. Removal of both your names from the list of heirs, the freezing of all accounts linked to Emily, and the paperwork to sell the Naples villa. I paused just long enough to see my mother's face freeze like wax. My father stared blankly, the house, but this summer, we made plans. Not my concern anymore. I cut him off, my voice as flat as a frozen lake. My mother clutched her chest, eyes wide. Nora, you can't be serious. I placed the pen on the table, looking directly at her. You think I'm joking? When my heart stopped beating, and not one of you cared. The door burst open. Emily stormed in, still in her crisp white linen dress, oversized sunglasses, clutching a latte. Nora, I just saw your message. How could you do this? I'm in the middle of a crisis, you know that. You always make everything about yourself. I leaned back, watching my sister like I was observing a ridiculous play. Your crisis is crown molding, Emily. My crisis was cardiac arrest. I'm pretty sure we're not operating on the same level here. Emily screamed, her voice a shrill needle stabbing straight into my brain. You're so selfish! You're stressing everyone out! Lucas calmly stood, pulling more documents from his briefcase. Miss Gibson, I've also prepared a restraining order just in case. My mother shouted. Nora, stop this! You'll regret it! I tilted my head slightly, my smile unhurried. No need to raise my voice. No, Mother. The ones who regret this, it won't be me. The room fell into silence. Only the steady beep of the monitor remained as solid and unwavering as I was in that moment. After all these years, it finally beat only for me. I thought I was numb to my family's shocks by now. Turns out I had underestimated them. 4 days after signing all the paperwork, I received an anonymous email. The subject line was simply 3 words, Dad's medical records. I opened it with instinctive caution, but as the first line appeared, I felt like I was being pulled into an icy whirlpool. Robert Gibson, diagnosed with hereditary cardiac arrhythmia in 1986. Ongoing monitoring for biological daughter Emily Gibson. No records of monitoring for Nora Gibson. I sat frozen. The shock seeped into every bone in my body. I had never known my father had a hereditary heart condition, and they had never once mentioned that I, the daughter they always called the caretaker's sister, might also carry that gene. And the name Emily Gibson. They had been monitoring my sister's heart health since she was a child, but not me. My phone slipped from my hand, falling under the hospital bed sheets. They knew. They had known all along. They chose to protect Emily. They chose to leave me in the dark. Lucas answered on the first ring. Lucas, I just received something. You need to verify immediately. I forwarded him the email. A thick, heavy silence stretched across the line before Lucas finally swore under his breath. The first time I had ever heard him do that. Damn it, Nora. This is deliberate medical concealment. I'll have my team go through all the records, but from what I'm seeing, they've known about this risk since you were a child. I leaned my head against the cold mattress, staring at the stark white ceiling. But inside me, there was only pitch-black emptiness. Lucas, I want the world to know. All of it. This isn't just about money or me being used like a living ATM. They let me live my whole life as a ticking time bomb without so much as a warning. Lucas exhaled. I get it. But this is going to be huge, Nora. Are you ready for that? I pressed my lips together, my voice firm. They chose to protect Emily. Now it's my turn to protect myself. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I dug up old photos, faded medical records I'd been forced to forget. The puzzle pieces started falling into place in the most terrifying way. Why was I always the kid who had to walk to the clinic alone when I had a high fever while Emily got an ambulance for a stomachache? Why was Emily always prioritized in health checkups while I was handed off to the family doctor with a dismissive, Nora is healthy, no need to worry? And why every time I asked about family medical history did they just smile and change the subject? I knew why now, because I wasn't their biological child. Lucas's call the next morning confirmed everything. I have the documents. Nora, you're the daughter of Sarah Gibson, Margaret's sister. You were legally adopted when you were 2 after Sarah died in a car accident. It felt like my entire past was being stripped bare. I wasn't their child. I was the daughter of a dead woman, and they had kept me out of obligation, or more accurately, as a backup plan. They knew. They knew the heart condition wasn't hereditary for me. but they never bothered to tell me because I wasn't important enough to know. Lucas stayed silent for a moment before speaking. We'll use this. We'll make the medical records public, expose their cover-up. And Nora, I need you to understand. Once you do this, there's no going back. I closed my eyes, taking a long breath. Lucas, I never had anything to go back to. That day, I drafted an email to all my company staff, friends, and even old business partners who knew my family. No names, no direct accusations, just the story of a girl who grew up in a family filled with secrets and lies. A girl who almost died because of information that was deliberately kept from her. When I hit send, a wave of coldness and relief washed over me. No more burdens, no more guilt, just the raw, ugly truth that needed to be told. And I knew the real battle had only just begun. I always thought of myself as a private person. I didn't like noise, never needed anyone to know my pain. But this time, I understood. Silence only fed people like my family. And I was done living in the gilded cage they had built. I opened my laptop, my fingers gliding across the keyboard with resolve. I wasn't writing as a betrayed daughter. I was writing as someone who had survived a lifetime of manipulation. I didn't name them. Just the story of a girl who paid every bill for parties she was never invited to. A girl raised to be quiet, to sacrifice, to stand in the shadows while others basked in the spotlight. Until the day she almost died and realized she wasn't even part of that family. Overnight, the post spread like wildfire. The comments flooded in. Thousands, then hundreds of thousands of people sharing the story. Strangers messaged me about toxic families, decades of silence, invisible scars they carried. The media got involved. I didn't need to name names. They connected the dots themselves. They knew. The New York business community knew. Social media groups knew. The Gibson family was stripped bare in front of the high society they once ruled. Emily panicked. She posted stories denying everything, claiming I was lying, that I was jealous of her success, but her desperate attempts only made her a laughingstock online. Lucas sent me an audio recording he'd received from an anonymous source. In it, Emily was screaming at my parents, demanding they do something. You're just going to let her do this? You have to stop her? People are looking at me like I'm the villain. Do something, my mother hissed in the recording. We're trying, Emily. But Nora's always been the ungrateful one. She's gone too far this time. My father only let out a weak sigh, as if everything that was happening was just an unwanted inconvenience. I listened to the recording in silence. No more anger, just a bitter relief. The evidence they had tried to hide their whole lives was now exposing them all on its own. A few days later, I received a formal complaint from Emily's lawyer. She accused me of defamation, damaging her reputation, and causing her severe emotional distress. Lucas merely scoffed when he glanced at the papers. They're really desperate now. I nodded. You know what to do. Lucas struck back by filing a countersuit, attaching all the evidence of financial fraud Emily had committed under my name, unauthorized loans, bank accounts she had secretly accessed, lavish expenses I had been forced to pay. When the court dismissed Emily's lawsuit, Lucas said bluntly, with no more politeness, They dug their own grave, Nora. Now we just need to give them a little push. That same day, a video of Emily screaming and throwing a cocktail at a journalist during a charity gala in Manhattan went viral. Her smudged makeup running down her cheeks became a meme across countless forums. I got a message from Nicholas, Emily's ex-boyfriend. She's completely losing it. If you want, I'm willing to testify about everything I know. I replied with just one simple sentence. Thanks, but she'd write her own downfall. I wouldn't lift a finger. I shut down my laptop, quietly watching the sky outside. The gray clouds rolled over the city, but inside me, the storm had passed. What I needed to do, I had done. Now I just wanted peace, to enjoy my own heartbeat, its rhythm no longer theirs, only mine. I left New York on an autumn morning as the leaves began to change colors along Fifth Avenue. I didn't look back. Everything that belonged to me was packed neatly into 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket to California. San Diego welcomed me with golden sunshine and the salty ocean breeze. This city had no idea who I was, and I didn't need anyone to know. I just needed a space wide enough to breathe without the suffocating weight in my chest that had followed me for so many years. My new apartment was much smaller than the Upper East Side penthouse I used to rent for my parents under the excuse of maintaining the family image. But here, everything was mine, from the simple couch to the window overlooking the sea. I hired a professional estate auction company to liquidate everything that remained of the Gibson family's assets. I kept nothing except for an old photo of Aunt Sarah that Lucas had found in the archives. In the picture, she held me, a 2-year-old girl, with a tenderness I had never received from the people I called Mom and Dad. The auction went quickly. The Naples villa sold for well above the asking price. I didn't bother reading the whining texts from my mother or the meaningless threats in Emily's emails. I blocked all their contact. I had spent my whole life enduring those voices. Not anymore. Lucas advised me to keep a portion of the money for safety. But I had other plans. I used most of the funds to establish the Sarah Gibson Foundation, a charity supporting underprivileged families in screening and treating hereditary heart conditions. I wanted the foundation to be my real legacy. Not cold bank accounts, not glittering villas, but something warm, meaningful, carrying the imprint of the woman who gave me life. At the foundation's opening ceremony, I wore a simple black dress, standing before a small hall speaking to strangers. People I felt closer to than anyone who had ever called me daughter or sister. I told my story. No embellishments, no forced strength, just the truth about a child raised in a house full of fake parties where silence was painted as duty and sacrifice worn like a toxic badge of honor. I spoke about the importance of early heart health screening, about how neglect and lies could kill a person, not with a knife, but with indifference. When I finished, I saw tears streaming down the faces of people I had never met. But this time, I didn't feel obligated to comfort them. I just felt light, as if I had finally placed a period at the end of my story. Lucas approached me after the event, handing me a letter. "From them," he said softly. I looked at the pristine white envelope, my mother's neat handwriting clear on the front. I didn't open it. I tore it up and dropped it in the trash without a hint of hesitation. At night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, the ocean breeze running through my hair, and for the first time, I felt an unfamiliar peace. My phone buzzed. It was Nicholas. He sent me a photo. Emily being kicked out of a luxury boutique after yelling at the staff for refusing her return. I laughed. No bitterness left. She's finally learning what not being accepted feels like. I didn't reply to Nicholas anymore. My story with them was over. Now I had other stories to write, other people to meet, other heartbeats to protect. I didn't plan it, but somehow everything seemed to fall into place at just the right time. After the launch of the Sarah Gibson Foundation, I received hundreds of emails, not just hollow congratulations. More than that, there were long, tearful letters from people I had never met. They told me about their families, the invisible walls, the quiet wounds, the names they kept buried like shameful secrets. I read every word. Each story was like a mirror reflecting me in those past years. I realized I wasn't as alone as I had thought. The idea to start a support group for survivors of toxic families came to me one drizzly night while I was typing a reply to a middle-aged woman in Ohio. Someone who had spent 30 years under her mother's subtle control. I hosted a trial chat on Zoom. I gave it a simple title, No Longer Alone. At first, only a handful of people showed up, but the next week it grew to 20, then 50. They came from everywhere, teachers, lawyers, nurses, retail workers, students, all with one thing in common. They had been suffocated by their own families, forced to sacrifice themselves to keep up the perfect family facade. The first session ended in silence. No one wanted to leave the virtual room. We just sat there looking at each other, breathing. I finally understood what it meant to be quiet and not afraid. I officially founded the support group and named it Reclaim. We met regularly once a month, initially online, then slowly moving into small in-person gatherings in San Diego. There was no curriculum, no preaching. We just shared, just listened. And that alone started to heal old wounds. I met women brave enough to sue their parents for financial abuse. Single fathers who admitted to being manipulated by their ex-wives for over a decade. Young women who finally said no to parents who used the excuse of family to control them. Each story was a small flame. Together, we became a wildfire. The media began writing about our group. They called us the silent wave, breaking the silence. I didn't care about the labels. What mattered to me was that every day more people escaped the invisible prisons they used to call home. Lucas attended one of our meetings, standing quietly in the corner as an observer. After the session, he walked over to me, his eyes soft as the breeze. "Nora, I've never seen you shine like this." I looked at him, tilting my head with a smile. "Maybe because this life is finally mine." That night, I wrote a new blog post, but it wasn't to expose anyone, not to unveil any more truths. I wrote it for those still sitting in the dark, too scared to step out. Family isn't a place where you have to shrink yourself, swallow your tears, or wonder if you're enough. Family is where you get to breathe. And if your blood family doesn't let you breathe, you have the right to leave. I hit publish and turned off my phone, not waiting for feedback. Not afraid anymore. Outside, the city lights of San Diego shimmered like living veins. I stepped onto the balcony, letting the wind toss my short hair. I had chopped off the long hair my mother always forced me to keep for the sake of femininity. I had also deleted every contact that had ever made me feel small in this world, and that was enough. I didn't look for news about them anymore, but the news still found me. 3 weeks after Reclaim was praised by the media as a quiet, awakening wave, an old colleague sent me an article. A photo of Emily standing in the middle of a shopping mall, hair disheveled, clutching a suitcase, being escorted out by security. She screamed at the paparazzi, "You don't understand, I'm Emily Gibson, my family is..." Her sentence was cut off by camera flashes and mocking laughter. I didn't feel pity, not even anger. I just sat still watching the image as if I was looking at a stranger in a cheap movie. Emily used to have it all. Brand ambassador contracts, red carpet events, live streams with tens of thousands of viewers. But now she was left with the ruins she'd built herself. I heard from Lucas that Emily tried to sue me again, this time accusing me of causing severe emotional distress and disrupting her career opportunities. But the court didn't even bother to hear the case. It was dismissed within 3 days, accompanied by the judge's remark that it was a desperate, baseless attempt. Lucas sent me the court recording. In it, Emily was screaming, her voice cracking. "She ruined my life. People are calling me a fraud, a parasite. You have to help me." But no one helped Emily. No one was left. The Gibson family collapsed faster than I expected. My father was forced to resign from the board of directors of 2 real estate companies where he had once sat as an honorary member. My mother was removed from the organizing committee of prestigious charity events in New York after the stories I shared on my blog were cross-checked with internal documents provided by her former friends. All the masks they had carefully built over 3 decades shattered in less than 3 months. Friends distanced themselves, the press dug deep into financial secrets, shady relationships I never thought I needed to uncover. But now the community did it for me. They exposed everything my family had tried to hide: mountains of debt, investment fraud, fake charity funds. I didn't have to do anything. They destroyed themselves. I heard my mother had to sell the family's heirloom diamond ring. The one she always declared was the Gibson women's legacy, just to pay rent. And Emily, she wandered through second-rate events, clinging to old connections no one cared about anymore. A photo of her drunk, mascara running down her face, yelling at staff at a small event in Brooklyn went viral. The most popular caption, "From Instagram queen to failure princess." Someone messaged me asking how it felt to see them like that. I answered with just one short sentence. "I feel nothing." And that was the truth. I didn't feel anything anymore. No satisfaction, no vindication, no pity. Lucas suggested I countersue them for the emotional and financial damages they had caused me over the years. I just shook my head. No need. They're already facing the consequences. I had chosen my path, a path with no traces of them. I didn't need to go back to pick up the broken pieces they had left behind. The day the Sarah Gibson Foundation reached its milestone of funding its first 100 free heart surgeries, I hosted a small party. No prestigious guests, just the people from Reclaim, those who had dared to step out of the massive shadows of their families. We raised glasses of juice, no alcohol, no fake elegance, and laughed. "We live for ourselves now," said a woman in her 50s, her eyes glowing with pure joy. I smiled, nodding. "And that is something they'll never have." They had once labeled me everything: the perfect daughter, the model sister, the obedient heir, and finally the backup daughter. I had lived my whole life under those names, like a heavy coat forcing me to bow my head. Now, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I no longer recognized any trace of that girl. My hair was shorter, my smile lighter, and my eyes no longer searched for approval from those who never truly saw me as family. The day I officially changed my legal name, erasing the Gibson name entirely, keeping only Nora Sarah, I stood in front of the San Diego County Court, paperwork in hand, and Lucas asked if I was sure. "More sure than ever," I said. "I'm no longer the Gibson heir. I don't need to be anything other than myself." My hand signing the papers didn't shake. I walked out of the courthouse with a freedom in my steps I had never known after years of being dragged down by invisible chains. I rented a small studio near the beach. On weekends, I drove myself to the mobile clinics funded by the Sarah Foundation, helping provide free screenings for low-income families. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a spokesperson. I was just someone sitting next to them, listening to their stories about chest pains they had been afraid of, doubts they had never dared face. I taught them how to ask questions, how to demand their rights, how not to stay silent. And every time I left, I felt a little more healed. I no longer kept photos of the Gibson family, nor did I keep gifts from Emily or my mother. I returned everything that had ever symbolized control, obligation, or emotional debt. I didn't need them anymore. Now, the things I kept were photos with the Reclaim group, notebooks full of scribbles from our meetings, thank you cards from families whose lives were saved thanks to the screening program, and a ring, Aunt Sarah's ring, the one Lucas helped me buy back from a stranger. I wore it as a quiet reminder that I was her daughter and my own. On my 37th birthday, I didn't throw a party. I only invited a few new friends, the old support group, and Mary, the one who had been by my side from the very beginning. We had dinner outdoors under warm golden string lights. No toasts, no speeches, no flowery words, just soft laughter, gentle shoulder touches, everyday stories from people learning how to live for themselves. I stood on the balcony, letting the California breeze run through my hair and the morning light dry out the old dark corners inside me. The sea in the distance still roared like the slow, steady breath of someone who had finally learned to live for themselves. I didn't look back. I didn't need to close any doors. The past closed itself quietly, like the things I had chosen to leave behind. Sarah's ring rested in my hand, no longer a symbol of pain, just a beautiful pause in the life story I would now write for myself. Nora's story is not just a journey of breaking free from a toxic family. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting others, but letting go of the things that once imprisoned us in silence. In real life, some ties that seem like blood can actually be invisible chains. Choosing to step out, live by our own values, and build our own happiness isn't selfish. It's the deepest form of self-love, and sometimes that's what real freedom looks like.